Hello, welcome back to this series of instructional videos on the Intopia simulation. This particular aspect of the game is a very important one about transferring money to and from areas. So if you recall, we have a home office in this game, and we have between 1 and 3 operating areas. So one of the first things that we have to do in the game, or at least in early periods, is transfer some of this capital to the areas for plants and inventory. So really it's, I liken it to mom and dad having to transfer money to 1, 2, or 3 of their children that are off to university in other areas. You know, in order for the 3 children to survive, they're going to need some capital over there. So in early periods, we'll be transferring money out for the children so they can complete their university studies. And then in later periods, when mom and dad are in a nursing home, the kids are transferring money back to them so that they can survive, okay? But really in the course of the game, the simulation, the home office is transferring capital to areas so that they can build plants and inventory. And then in later periods, once those operating areas have been profitable, they'll transfer some of that money back to home office for dividend payments and to cover some of the home office expenses that occur, such as research and development, licensing, market research, that sort of thing. Okay, so home office doesn't really have any income throughout the course of the game. They have starting capital, but they'll need income to survive. Okay, so you'll start the game with a certain amount of capital, which is cash, which is reflected in your cash account and also in your common stock account. So to begin operations, you actually have to start and explicitly transfer money to the areas to begin operations. Okay, and note that in this particular game, all cash transfers occur simultaneously. So it doesn't really matter how you input things money-wise. So in other words, if you decide to, in the decision program, build a plant before you've transferred money, that doesn't matter, because what the program does is when it generates the decisions, it adds up all your cash inputs and all your cash outputs. If your inputs are greater than your outputs, then you have positive cash in the area and you get some interest income from that positive cash balance. If your outputs are greater than your inputs, then you get a line of credit, and of course you pay a little bit of interest expense. Okay, so let's say we start with $20 million. Okay, so you'll see in the home office we have $20 million in cash, and that's our total assets, and we also have $20 million in common stock. So one of the things that we need to do is transfer some money to the areas so that we can get going. We can build some plants, that sort of thing. So what we want to do is start by sending $10 million in cash over to Area 1. Okay, and you'll see that what happens is we have these special accounts that allow us to follow the money. So we haven't really reduced our assets in home office, we've just transferred them around a little bit. So we see this $10 million here, or 10,000 in this case, but let's say it's in thousands, is represented as subsidiary control. So that represents the amount that we have invested in one of the areas. And you'll see that that's offset by a liability over here called home office control. So Area 1 essentially owes home office 10,000, okay? And you can see that cash is represented over here. Now in the decision program, that's really easy to implement. So what we do is we go over to this transfer capital or earnings, and to implement that exact decision, I'll log back in because my session is timed out. We'll go transfer capital. So let me just, what we would want to do in that case is transfer to the area from home office. So that exact decision of 10,000 would be done as such. I'm just going to change this back here. Okay, so you'll see that this transfer to the area from the home office of 10,000, and in this case it's US dollars. Now there's a little option here that says convert foreign currency to local currency, and I'm going to leave that as no. I'm going to assume that this is a single currency game. But if you're running a multiple currency game and you're transferring something like Swiss francs from home office to the area, you may wish to automatically have that transfer. But in this particular case, we don't need to, so we'll just save that. And we have effectively done what occurs in this particular slide. Okay, so sent $10,000 over from home office to the area. Okay, now later on in the game, we might want to send that back. Okay, because home office is starting to run out of cash. So our other option is to send earnings to the home office from the area. Okay, now of course we wouldn't do this in the same period, but let's just say we did this particular transaction. So what that would do is it would reduce our home office control by 5,000 and then reduce our subsidiary control by 5,000. And there's the corresponding reduction in cash from 10,000 down to 5,000, and the home office control or home office cash goes back up to 15,000. Okay? And you can always do a transfer from the area to home office up to the limit of this home office. So when this becomes 0, which it might do, okay, which basically means that your child is no longer dependent on the home office, that becomes 0. You'll be restricted. You won't be able to use that particular transfer anymore. Okay? But there are other ways to transfer money back to home office. So later on in the game, we might see something like this, where we still got home office control of 5,000, but lo and behold, this particular area, let's call it EC or Eastern Canada or something like that, has made $15,000 over the course of the game in retained earnings. Home office, however, has lost $4,500. So we want to get this retained earnings to be positive in the home office. And the reason you want to do that is to pay dividends to your shareholders. So what we need to do is send this $15,000 over to the home office, okay, and with a corresponding amount in cash. Okay, so if we end up doing that, it's going to look like this. So let's send all of our earnings over, and it'll come out of cash and into cash, out of retained earnings and into retained earnings. And that's very easily implemented in the transfer capital. So let's go back, let's say this is in North America again. And instead of doing the transfers, we're going to send back earnings to home office of 15 million. Okay? Now, of course, we're not going to do all of these in the same period, but this would do it. This would send back those earnings. Okay, so that would clear out the retained earnings account in that particular area so that you would be able to pay dividends later in the game. Okay, so that's a very important aspect of the game, transferring money back and forth. So if you forget to do that, and oftentimes that happens early in the game when teams aren't prepared, so let's say they don't transfer any cash flow over to Area 1 and then open a plant, that plant gets opened using the line of credit. And then, of course, you pay interest on that, which is not something that you want to do. There's also an option to send service payments, and you can send service payments to other teams, and there's various ways that, or various reasons you might wish to do that. Let's say you have to give a team a penalty payment because you messed up a contract and didn't send them the right amount of money, so you have to give them you're paying them a fine based on what your contract says. You would use the service payment to do that. And that appears as a miscellaneous income on the receiving team's output and a miscellaneous expense on the sender's output. So because it's an income and expense, there's tax implications on that. So keep that in mind when you're sending service payments, that there are tax implications. That's why you don't ever want to lend money to a team using a service payment, because they're going to be taxed on it. So even though you'll get a tax shield as a team sending the service payment, the other team's actually going to be taxed on it. You can also use it to send money to your home office. Okay, so as you're going throughout the game, you might decide to send a service payment to home office to help them offset the expenses associated with research and development and marketing research and all that sort of thing. But that's limited to a percentage of your home office control account. So if we go back to this screen here, we see our home office control account is 5,000. You could send a service payment from this area to home office to a certain percentage of that. And usually it's around 10 or 20%, so you could send it back in that amount. So that's why it's always good to leave a little bit in your home office control account so that you can take advantage of that service payment. Because typically the taxes are less in home office than they are in any of the operating areas, so it's a good way to avoid taxes. And notice I said avoid as opposed to evade taxes, because it's certainly legal to do that. Okay, so here's one of those things where if we're going to send a service payment, if you're sending it to another team, it's an intercompany transaction. So here you make a service payment. We don't have any right now, so we'll add a new one. So we're going to send a team 15 from North America to China, the amount of $1 million. Okay, so remember that's going to be an income for them and an expense for you. Okay, now if you're doing it to yourself, so you're sending money back to your home office, that's the only option for a service payment, is for you to make that service payment back to home office. So from North America, I'm going to send $200,000, currency 4. So there's my my one service payment. Okay, and that again increases the income in home office and increases the expenses in the operating area associated with that. And again, you don't want to use these service payments for things like transfers of capital or for or the transfer of inventory. If you're selling inventory to another team, everything, the money and everything is handled on that intercompany sale form. You don't need to do a service payment. Okay, so that's what you need to know about transferring money in the Intopia game.